Okay, this is your 1 minute warning. Please grab your seats. 1 minute warning before our next session starts. This session will be virtual, 100% virtual. Again, please grab your seats as we begin the next session. If we can all grab our seats, we'd like to begin. We have this one session and then we will go into lunch break. So another opportunity for discourse and networking. But if you can grab your seats right now, we will begin the session on healthcare facilities and energy efficiency. All right, we are going to begin now. So if you can, please grab your seats. Here we go. If you are not going to grab your seat, if you wouldn't mind taking your conversations outside of the room, I would greatly appreciate it. This next session looks at energy efficiency improvements in the very energy intensive healthcare sector. Today, we're going to learn how energy efficiency impacts this unique sector from our speakers who will be joining us all virtually today. So everybody's up on screen. We have Lois Seacrest, Manager of Sustainability at Medexel. We have Michelle Patel, Managing Director, Retrofits at Counterpoint SRE. And Mike Lincoln, Principal at Green Rock Capital. Lois, Michelle, and Mike, thank you very much for participating with us today. First up is Lois.
Good morning. Travis, I'm not seeing my slides up on the screen. Do you have our slides up? There we go. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lois Seacrest, a manager of sustainability with Medexel. I'm excited to be joining you this morning to talk about my organization's work with energy savings, cost avoidance, and greenhouse gas reduction in healthcare. I'm based in St. Louis, and I had a previous career working as a project manager and commercial interior designer with St. Louis architecture firms. I had the pleasure of collaborating with Tim Michaels, who you heard speak earlier this morning, on the University City Green Practices Commission to show leadership by bringing sustainability to our municipality in St. Louis. I am a LEED accredited professional, and I've been involved in energy work for many years. I'm a generalist in sustainability, covering areas from energy to green buildings, waste management, healthy food, and green purchasing, and have been focused on this work for 15 years now. I was excited to see some parallels between Medexel's work and Dan's comments in the previous presentation. It's great to see the synergy of many organizations to benefit the communities where we're located. We've also been involved in market transformation projects to bring green products and innovations to market. Ours to date have focused on healthy food and green buildings, products and furniture produced without chemicals of concern, but the activities are very similar. So MedExcel is a healthcare facility service provider based in Indianapolis. Our largest customer is a faith-based health system headquartered in St. Louis. We provide services in healthcare facility planning, design, construction, facility management and operations, energy, real estate, and sustainability. We are a mission-focused organization with an emphasis on care of the earth and being good citizens through the Midwest, where you can see that our facilities are located on the map. Next slide. Why is healthcare different? Healthcare's impact on the environment is significant, and it's strongly linked to the health of the communities and the patients in our acute care hospitals and ambulatory facilities. Healthcare facilities must be resilient, and we must be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as community anchors. If you all recall the tornado that affected the Joplin Mercy Hospital a few years ago, not only did they need to stay in operation to take care of the patients, but a number of community members traveled to that facility not knowing where else to go. And we have seen that many times at our facilities. According to Practice Green Health, which is an educational and networking organization focused on sustainability in healthcare, healthcare is responsible for 8.5% of US greenhouse gas emissions, and inpatient healthcare is ranked by the US EPA as the second largest commercial energy user in the country. Climate impacts have already riddled many of the communities of hospitals that we support. Extreme heat days are more common in Texas. They also experienced a polar vortex just a year ago, which was a huge shock to that region, and they were rather unprepared for that event. Places in Tennessee have experienced more frequent and intense rain events due to increased atmospheric temperatures. We experienced that in St. Louis just 2 weeks ago, and I have friends that are flooded out of their homes. As oceans absorb heat, hurricane seasons are starting earlier and becoming more severe, as seen from the Gulf of Mexico to the east coast of Florida, directly impacting several of our facilities with MedExcel. I've illustrated here on the left side of the slide a few of those severe weather events that cause poor health outcomes, such as heat exhaustion, hypothermia, respiratory allergies and asthma, Lyme disease, and West Nile virus, to just name a few. At MedExcel and across healthcare, we have an obligation to mitigate our environmental impacts by improving our waste management practices so that we send less waste to landfill, and to reduce our energy use and shift to clean energy sources so that we pollute less in the communities where we are located. In addition, hospitals have numerous regulations to comply with, including Joint Commission, which is our regulatory body across the US, and local, state, and federal authorities having jurisdiction over our facilities. Next slide. I've listed here a chart of energy projects implemented by my organization that directly create Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas reductions. You may say that all of these are normal facility performance projects, and that is true. The projects on this list contribute to energy efficiency, which has always been the backbone of MedExcel's facility management and sustainability work. The items highlighted in bold also contribute to reducing our carbon footprint. The two types of projects go hand in hand. The extra steps required to not only reduce our energy use, but also reduce our carbon emissions are to move away from fossil fuels to renewable and clean energy sources. I highlighted here the significant project types that contribute the most to the intersection of energy reduction, cost avoidance, and carbon reduction. You cannot make improvements without tracking data and setting goals. To this end, one of our major activities in the past year has been to establish our baseline carbon footprint. This has been a huge effort requiring us to identify and track dozens of data sources. We are then setting reduction goals for the short term, which is this current fiscal year, and extending out to 2030 and 2040. And we have signed several external goals to show our commitment in healthcare and across the US. Additionally, design and construction standards are extremely important. We're in the middle of a design guidelines refresh to ensure that our standards align with our sustainability goals. And we're creating a focus on learning about net zero carbon buildings and zero waste, and how to achieve that through our facility design and our operations. Next slide. One of MedExcel's success stories has been to create its own facility performance dashboard, which you can see a snippet of that on the right side of the screen. We're able to track preset conditions for temperature, air changes, humidity, and other operational data in real time at each of our facilities. The system also tracks actual costs against budget, and it has the ability to track sustainability data such as water, sewer, and waste management for each facility. To support this, we have a dedicated team that monitors data to flag those presets that are out of compliance. We refer to that as fault detection. This team then helps facility managers troubleshoot the problems and take corrective action. The overall goal here is to ensure that our facilities are comfortable, compliant with regulations, and cost-effective. Next slide. Several standard operational practices outlined here also support the ideal intersection of energy reduction, cost avoidance, and carbon reduction. Another of our big success stories was to join the Department of Energy's Better Buildings Challenge all the way back in 2011. We set a goal to reduce energy use across our entire acute care hospital portfolio 20% by 2020 from a 2008 baseline. We met that goal 3 years early, resulting in 23% energy reduction, tens of millions of dollars in cost avoidance, and significant carbon dioxide reductions. This shows the importance of setting a big goal, communicating it clearly across your organization and many, many, many times over, and then celebrating when you achieve success. Next slide. This has been a brief overview of how we approach energy efficiency, cost reduction, and sustainability in healthcare. And after our other two co-presenters, we'll have time at the end of our presentations for Q&A. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Hi, this is Michelle from Counterpoint Sustainable Real Estate. Next slide, please. We provide financing for all commercial property types nationwide since 2013. The financing, for those of you that don't know what PACE is, it is a voluntary property tax that allows private capital financing to support measures that support the common good. It is very flexible financing that is self-amortizing, that is, there is no balloon payment, and it may be treated off balance sheet. The financing terms are up to 35 years, capped by the estimated useful life of the equipment being financed. And of interest for in the healthcare sector, as well as some of your non-corporate type of ownerships, The financing is based on the property financials. You don't need to be investment grade, give a guarantee, or some of the other credit metrics that would typically apply to a lot of the healthcare facilities. Next slide, please. PACE has rapidly grown since we started in 2013, mostly because it provides 100% financing for capital intensive projects at fixed payments that are low, they're amortized over 30 years, and you can finance a project without using any CapEx. Like I said, you do not need investment grade ownership. And if you have a project that has a long payback period, the fixed interest rate smooths out the impact to cash flows. If you have a long construction period, 2 or 3 years, such as what occurs in a lot of gut renovations or new construction, you can defer the first payment for years. I have some projects that are deferring payment for 3 years right now until they stabilize, finish the project, and start generating revenues. If there is any required maintenance, which we actually insist on financing for any cogeneration or green roof projects that we finance, prepaid service contracts may be included in the financing. If there is a desire to avoid an increase in debt, which sometimes you see in those who are trying to maintain a credit rating or increase their credit rating, this may be treated as off balance sheet. And as the repayment is through the property tax bill and may be repaid out of operating expenses. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just go through some case studies that we have done of some healthcare properties. We do finance all commercial property types, but we have a couple healthcare. This is a former mental institution in Philadelphia, the Kirkbride Center, which was in bankruptcy 10 years ago. They restructured, came out of bankruptcy, but they're dealing with 6 buildings, a large campus on 48 acres, and they needed a little over $4 million to upgrade their HVAC throughout the system. They had trouble getting mortgages, which is part of what put them into bankruptcy to begin with. And they they have low operating margins. The building currently is functioning as social services. It's the homeless shelter for the city of Philadelphia, as well as a school for a lot of social services in the building. They had very low operating margins and couldn't afford the $4 million. So I would say this is a PACE success story that we were able to provide a little over $4 million for them to upgrade the HVAC for the facility. The estimated reduction in carbon emissions, there's a lot of words on the page, was 668 metric tons per year. Next slide, please. This project is just completing construction right now. This is a healthcare laundry facility in Baltimore that used a passive transference of transferring heat from their wastewater to heat their incoming water. The carbon reduction was astounding for this project. This was just a little over $1 million, but I'd like to use this project to show the impact of $1 million is a lot of money, but the reduction was 1,892 metric tons of carbon per year. So we are very proud of this project. And it was recently highlighted on our earnings call as being one of the highest impact projects that we have financed to date. Next slide, please. And keeping in the same vein of social responsibility driving economic benefits, I use this project to show this is not a beauty building. This is an old manufacturing plant in Detroit that is being converted into artisan tenant flex office space. And the Detroit Stormwater gave $50,000 seed money as a grant to the owner to incentivize just developing plans for a green roof. It's a tremendous example of public-private partnership that the owner could develop plans with no risk, found that the green roof for this building would work, and then we came in with private capital with the $1 million to put a green roof on this building. For those of you that are used to financing green roofs and capital-intensive projects through grants and incentives, the only grant for this was the small $50,000 grant from Detroit Stormwater, but this was a cash flow neutral project due to the PACE financing's annual low cost. Next slide, please. This is a hospital in Los Angeles that was recently purchased, again, out of bankruptcy, new ownership. They found a building with extensive deferred maintenance. And we're looking to do an expansion and create a new behavioral health center on one of the floors. This again is a project that they might struggle in the typical financing to find financing for it. This is one that is currently in process with the construction, and we are anticipating having an energy savings of 300,000 kilowatt hours annually. A lot of this project was a seismic retrofit in addition to the energy efficiency improvements that were financed. Next slide, please. This is a almost $50 million project. It was driven by a $20 million seismic retrofit that was mandated for code compliance. They approached us for $20 million to finance the seismic retrofit. And we did a cost benefit analysis focusing on sterilizers and autoclaves and things, some lighting and some things that we thought were low hanging fruit. We worked through it as long as we did it, measure an ECM by ECM cost benefit analysis. And we ended up replacing some chillers, doing some elevator modernization. And you can see there's $50 million that went into this. They actually expanded this to 5 hospitals in their network. And we did energy efficiency improvements as well as the original $20 million for the seismic retrofit. Next slide, please. I did not want to forget about new construction using PACE. This is an assisted living facility, new construction. This is an owner that came to us first to finance in Colorado, and then we're dispersing right now. They're just finishing up a new construction build in Texas. And PACE for new construction, it stops the more expensive, more efficient equipment from being eliminated from the budget when there starts to be supply cost overruns. During COVID, we have seen enormous cost overruns from labor, from lack of supply chain, from many different factors. By the nature of PACE, the equipment is spec'd in advance and cannot be downgraded. And it's 100% financing. We've deferred the repayment. And so we are supporting a project of new construction, even through a time that I think is pretty stressful for those that are in the development business. Next slide, please. And again, this is a new construction assisted living facility, this time in Florida. The challenge here was that electrical costs were very low in this area. I think they were maybe 5 cents a kilowatt hour, and we needed to be very careful in our cost benefit analysis to help the owner reduce their operating expenses and really examine the equipment that they were selecting in this new construction build. Next slide, please. In Florida, if those of you who remember Hurricane Irma and all the deaths that happened in the nursing homes, the state of Florida mandated generators. That you are mandated to have generators for life support, as it is now in healthcare facilities. But this was mandating for their HVAC systems to maintain cooling, as they had deaths from overheating in these facilities. With the low operating margins that these facilities operate, this was a tremendous burden for the entire nursing home industry in Florida. The generators, the typical cost we were seeing was about $500,000. Some of them were close to $1 million for a generator for their HVAC. This particular project, Train came to us as they were going to put a generator in. The owner had a $27 million mortgage construction loan that they had taken out because they were in the midst of renovating one of the floors and upgrading it. And the building needed a complete HVAC overhaul, or they were going to have to install 2 generators. And Train really wanted to make the building more efficient and decrease the load that would be on the generators. So we financed the core HVAC for the building, upgraded actually the second floor renovation that was underway, and threw in some lighting into this project also, as well as paying for the original mandated generators. Next slide, please. This is a hospital in Rhode Island that is very typical. This is a for-profit hospital that didn't have the strongest financials, and they wanted to address some deferred maintenance in their HVAC. They were very close to going on temporary chillers. And we gave them $18 million, which included some disinfecting technologies. This was financed 2021 in the middle of COVID, as well as we got some other projects approved by the C-suite into this, upgrading a walk-in freezer and some other energy efficiency improvements for this. Next slide, please. Again, another mandatory generator. I'm showing this is a very typical Florida nursing home that the owner, because of the nature of PACE, didn't just finance the generator, but they made additional energy efficiency improvements to this building, the roofing and some windows, and I think they replaced the front door also for this building. Next slide. This is one of our earliest PACE financing. We closed this in 2015. It's been featured on the Department of Energy in their Better Buildings toolkit as an example of using PACE for resiliency. And I know that this is an energy efficiency conference, but resiliency and energy efficiency go hand in hand in my mind, and we can accomplish both. So this was a cash grab. This was a skilled nursing facility. The roofing that we installed was not only hurricane resistant, but it was cool roof certified. And the windows, the impact windows that were installed were Energy Star rated. Next slide, please. I'm especially proud of this financing for Roger Williams Hospital in Rhode Island. They were in midst of a large emergency room renovation, maybe 40 million. I can't remember the exact CapEx for it, but the facility manager needed 5 million for, yes, again, another chiller. And he got turned down and he was worried. So he came to us and said, can we think about doing 5 million of PACE to finance this? Because all the capital is dedicated to the emergency room expansion. Not only did we get the 5 million chiller financed, as you can see, we financed $42 million worth of upgrades just to this particular facility. The C-suite, again, through a cost-benefit analysis, ECM by ECM, we showed that on the first year or on an annual basis, the low PACE payment made capital intensive projects and those that you wouldn't traditionally think of having a short payback actually make sense the first year. So we got a lot of projects approved for this particular facility. Next slide, please. PACE benefits stakeholders. I've been talking mostly about property owners. For mortgage lenders, they're seeing preservation of the collateral value by addressing a lot of the deferred maintenance For the construction industry, anyone in PACE is getting calls daily from the subcontractors looking to get jobs awarded and have financing, especially if credit capital is not available because it's dependent on the owner's credit. For the government, we have been working in partnership with the city of San Francisco since 2015 to support their planning initiatives. The first was a mandatory seismic retrofit program, which our PACE financing was presented as part of the rollout to support the seismic retrofit, then support of accessory dwelling units, and then for green roof installation, the PACE has been portrayed. New York City has followed this lead by, they rolled out their decarbonization for the Climate Mobilization Act, with PACE financing being a partner legislation presented with Local Law 97 that is mandating decarbonization. The tenants sometimes pay the PACE back, but they also benefit from the lower utility bill. I can discuss that more. That pertains mostly to triple net buildings and not to healthcare, but that is a feature of PACE. Next slide, please. Thank you. And now it's up to Mike.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, Josh, thanks for the introduction, and Travis, thank you for bringing us all together. I'm sorry I'm not with you all today, but I know Missouri well, Missouri from a healthcare perspective very well. As Josh said, I'm Mike Lincoln. I'm a principal with Green Rock Capital. I'm based here in Chicago. I've been in the healthcare financial services industry for over 20 years and have worked with many of your health systems in your state, from Ascension in St. Louis all the way over to Western Missouri Regional Medical Center in Warrensburg. So I know your market well, I know the industry well, and I'm really excited about connecting some of those dots between the healthcare industry and PACE and energy efficiency today. So really want to do three things. I'll give you a brief overview on our firm, and because it will tell you a little bit about the lens that we look through. And then the second is I'll echo a couple of Michelle's comments about PACE and what Lois had to say about funding the improvements that she laid out in some of her comments. And then at the end, I'll give you a brief case study on a PACE financing that we recently completed for a healthcare system in California. That was it's the largest PACE financing ever. It was $103 million, and it completely recapitalized their balance sheet. And I'll kind of walk you through some of those elements as something to think about. So just to start, so Green Rock. So we're based in Marin County, California, Larkspur. We're a capital provider. We service the healthcare industry as well as hospitality and multifamily. And then that's not a departure. There's some similarities between the business models, but healthcare is at the core of our DNA, as you probably surmised from my comments and my background. Our business is really built around bringing PACE solutions, so that's capital, so that healthcare providers, and when we think about healthcare, there are four buckets we work with. We do senior housing, acute care, medical office, and bio and life science. And we provide the capital to make these long-term investments in the facilities to create healthier environments, support ESG initiatives, but make the buildings more efficient financially. And so to date, as Michelle said, PACE financing has been around for not even 10 years yet. My business partners and founding principals have been in PACE really since inception. And so to date, we've closed more than $300 million of C-PACE financing for healthcare. We call it H-PACE. It's a little bit different. And H-PACE to us is basically what we'd take Lois's slide that said why healthcare is different, and that's our starting point. And then we tailor the PACE solution for that. And next slide, please, Travis. So we work. Our approach and process is to make C-PACE support the healthcare business model. A couple things about our team. I mean, we're in this all day, every day, as our day jobs, but for several of us, including my partner, Joe Ufrat. We live healthcare outside of it. Joe's on the board of Marin General. I'm on the board of a not-for-profit senior housing operator here in Chicago. So it allows us to kind of connect some of those dots that make the process different. We benefit from an advisory board that supports us in this health and our healthcare focus. Jim McManus was the CFO of Multicare, and then Martin Eric. Importantly, he ran S&P, the rating agencies, healthcare rating agency for S&P for 30 years. So we're very thoughtful about how PACE impacts the balance sheet. And as I get into it, it's a little bit of a tweener. So if for the accountants in the room, we rely, whether this is on or off balance sheet, that's entirely up to your accountants. And so whether it's above the line or below the line, that's to you. It's one of the actually great things about PACE is it's a little bit of a tweener. So next slide, please, Travis. So what is PACE? So just to refresh and to enhance some of the comments that Michelle made, PACE is a property assessed financing. Assessment financing is really not new, even though the CPACE industry is 10 years old. Assessment financing has been around for over 100 years. It's what municipalities use to finance infrastructure, the horizontal structure, sewers, water, roads, sidewalks, that type of thing. CPACE financing now allows building owners to source capital, direct capital, to reimburse for either new projects in the categories that we've discussed so far, but principally for energy conservation, resiliency, water, or renewable energy projects. Just if we have some financial execs in the room, or those of you that are when you start thinking about structuring and sourcing capital to fund these projects, PACE has some very attractive elements to it. I spent my life in corporate finance and I've been a corporate banker for a long time. And so some of these features that you see here will resonate. It's a fixed rate financing. It's typically for 20 or 30 years, as you saw through some of Michelle's case studies. There's no guarantee. For many of our project sponsors, they love the fact that it's non-recourse. There's no loan agreement. There are no financial covenants. The payment obligation is tied to the property, so not the owner. So if you sell a property, the PACE financing can survive that transaction and stick with the property. It's also very flexible. So you can call it and prepay it in part or in full at any time. The principal doesn't accelerate, so there's no cross default, no cross acceleration. And of course it allows many owners and senior lenders to check the ESG bucket. So just a quick comment. Next slide, please, Travis. So comment on kind of, so if how do you on-ramp PACE? So this is a financing solution. If it's a source of capital to fund these investments, how do you do that? And Michelle had some examples of these three kind of what I call on-ramps. So one is you can look back reimbursement. You can actually go in many states, and each state is different. Travis, correct me, 3 years in Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. You can actually look back and any eligible assets that have been invested in the past 3 years, you're able to go back and recapitalize. And Michelle had a couple examples of that. You can recapitalize those projects using PACE, and that's what we'll see that in the case study for the hospital in California that I have to share with you. So typically it's a 2 to 3 year look back period, and you can recapitalize those investments, repatriate some of the liquidity, can use it to, and there's no restriction on the use of the PACE proceeds. You can use it to just put it on your balance sheet. You can pay down senior debt. You can fund reserves. Many not-for-profit health systems still have defined benefit pension plans. Many of them are underfunded. There's no reason you couldn't source PACE to reimburse yourself for eligible investments made in the past 2 or 3 years and refresh your DB plan. So, or you could just simply do it to increase liquidity and days cash on hand, which of course is an important metric for the healthcare rating agencies. Second on-ramp, no surprise here, new construction. So you have a project that you're planning You're trying to think about, okay, I mean, there are only two sources of capital typically, well, three now because there's PACE, but there's debt and equity. And you think about how are we going to fund this project? If you get, there's always the value engineering exercise. Gee, we can't afford some things, some measures that are important, but they're hitting the cutting room floor. Then PACE is a way to kind of to take another look at the budget and figure out how to make sure the things that are important to the project and the building over the long term stay in. And you can start either on a ground up project or something that's already in process. And then finally, just ongoing CapEx. So any TI, any project refresh, a repositioning, eligible measures for CPACE. So, next slide, please, Travis. So you probably got the sense for this already. There in PACE is in Missouri and 37 other states. The eligible measures are pretty similar across the state programs, but here in Missouri, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and water conservation are three of the main big buckets. And you can see here kind of what qualifies, and we've talked a little bit about that so far. So energy efficiency, all your lighting controls, your HVAC systems, anything kind of outside of the building envelope. So the glazing, the windows, the roofs, conveying systems, elevators, that all works. Renewable, if you have an alternative energy strategy, that works. Water conservation, so plumbing fixtures, low flow, irrigation, all that's typically eligible. And then in some markets, and we'll see this in our case study in California, resiliency is a big part of that. And resiliency means different things in different markets. If you go to Oklahoma, resiliency means wind. If you go to California, resiliency is typically seismic. Florida is typically hurricanes. So, but resiliency is anything that's any investment that's made to either keep a building online or get it back up online faster after some sort of exogenous event. So those are the eligible measures. Travis, let's go to the next slide. So we're in Missouri, which PACE is in, as I said, 37, 38 states. Each state and each program has its own nuances. The great news in Missouri is that Travis and Josh have built a great program. And it's, I think about it as a banker, I think in terms of liquidity, how efficient and kind of how much time and calories is it going to take to get a project done. And Missouri has got a really good story to tell on that. And Josh and Travis have built this program that makes the Missouri PACE program and the Show Me PACE program very efficient. And we're really excited about that because, to our clients, it's like, okay, we're going to structure a PACE deal. Now, what's it going to take in terms, again, in terms of time and expense and brain damage to get it done? And in Missouri, it has a really good story to tell. So, kudos to that. But each state has its own nuances. But that's one of the roles that we play as a PACE capital provider. We can guide you through that process. Okay, next slide, please, Travis. So here's a case study, and then we'll get to some conversation. But I think this is really interesting. So Chinese hospital, it's a 501c3 not-for-profit community hospital, founded in the early 1900s. And in 2016, as you can imagine, at that point, now you've got a building that's close to 100 years. They embarked on a project, a brand new patient tower project. It was $160 million, and it was funded pretty typically with equity, with tax-exempt bonds, and with a tranche of CPACE. So I guess that's not typical. That actually, one of my business partners led the CPACE financing at the time. So fast forward, late last year, in a conversation, they were looking at, we had a conversation to advise them about the opportunity to refinance and recapitalize their entire debt capital structure. So refinance the tax-exempt bonds and refinance the CPACE with $103 million CPACE financing, which closed in January. So, and as you've seen, CPACE can be used anything for, a $500,000 lighting upgrade to, in this case, $103 million complete recap of the balance sheet, which is what we did for the Chinese hospital. In this case, and the way you get there is you look, since this was a project that had been completed in, actually at that time it was 5 years. So for those of you who are kind of doing the math, it's like, well, wait a minute. You told me it was a 3-year look back and this is 5 years. In this case, the CSCDA, which was the governing body for PACE, made an exception given the essential service and the use of a not-for-profit hospital. So it allowed us to go back 5 years and refinance for those eligible investments. The eligible investments in this project, there was split between, there's about a little over $30 million in energy, there's $10 million in water efficiency. That was a lot of plumbing, low flow plumbing, $20 million in seismic, and $34 million in soft costs, which a lot of the A&E and direct and general conditions. So you can see there kind of how we hit the buckets, not to get too detailed. I mean, the glazing, the roofing, and again, resiliency was a big part of it, as we'll see in those states where, so the concrete reinforcement, structural steel, all that qualified. And what we found was that as you can see, over $100 million qualified, which allowed them to take out the existing PACE and the tax-exempt bonds. The structure for this financing, and this is where the HPACE comes in. And so, Lois, I love your slide on why healthcare is different. I would add 2 things. I would add that it's capital intensive, and it's also low margin. The typical margin for a not-for-profit healthcare provider is probably 2%. So anytime you can save at that type of margin, if you can save $1 million, that's financially has the same impact of generating $50 million in revenue. So anytime we can save money and in a not-for-profit, low margin business, low margin not-for-profit healthcare business, the financial impact is significant. And that was the case for Chinese Hospital. We saved the reduced debt service alone saved them about $40 million over the 10 years. Let's go to the next slide, Travis, and we'll just kind of give you a kind of look at the sources and uses. So we provided $103 million in the gross PACE proceeds. So you can see the 2012 tax-exempt bonds were completely repaid. The 2019 PACE bond was repaid. And in this case, and to make the point, to kind of echo the point I made earlier about there's no restrictions on the use of PACE proceeds in a reimbursement. They elected to add $5 million back to their balance sheet in terms of additional liquidity. And so, one of the important financial metrics in healthcare, of course, is days cash on hand. So in this case, Chinese Hospital, it's a 96-bed hospital. It's, 200, it was kind of low $200 million in revenue. Their annual operating expenses, this is all on Emma, so it's not public. I mean, this is public information. It's probably, let's call it 200 million. So think of their daily operating expenses of about $600,000. So you can see that $5 million the PACE that we provided that went back onto their balance sheet immediately has the impact of basically 8 or 9 days cash on hand. So if you're going to go talk to your CFO about this type of project, then that's the type of thing that starts to get their attention and some buy-in to thinking about PACE as an alternative source of capital. We added 2 years of capitalized interest to reduce the cash flow, and then of course there were some issuance costs as part of the transaction. So next slide, Travis, and then we'll get to Q&A. So this is kind of the so what. I mean, the great thing about PACE is that it's matching the right capital with the right assets. So all these eligible investments, water, energy, alternative energy, resiliency. I mean, these are all long-term assets that have long-term payback, and they don't fit well with your traditional bank debt, which is 5 to 7 years, or equity, which is expensive. So you have a source of capital now specifically designed, perfectly aligned with the assets that you want to put in your building and the savings or the cash flow of the savings they can generate over a long period of time. here's another way we looked at it for Chinese hospital. You can the impact the cash flow impact it had in the first 14 years was almost $60 million. You can see the $5 million in working capital, and then just the first 2 years of Cap I, that was $14 million, and then the interest only period, we were able to structure an extended interest only period again. So in a low margin business where cash is king, this is really one of the things that gets the attention of the executive team of a health system, not just particularly in the financial suite. So we should probably pause there, Travis. I would just I would add that PACE is a great solution. It's not a magic elixir, but for the right thing, for the right project, whether it be recapitalize an existing one or a new project, it can really make the difference between getting the building you want and with the things that you desire. So, all right, let's go to Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. A couple of comments that Mike made just to give you a heads up. As far as Missouri's law goes, it is not explicit as to any look back period. Missouri does have a statute component that says that the property owner must deem an economic benefit. As far as the districts that MEI operates, we have an SAR, a savings to investment ratio. So we see anything back from 3 to 5 years. You still have only 20 years to deem that benefit. Looking back beyond 5 makes it hard to do so because you can't count the savings of those 5 as an example. The savings starts at the day that you start to finance it. So that gives you a little insight there as to what Mike was talking about. And also, if you were not aware, MEI recently, as of this year, does now administer the St. Louis City PACE program, the St. Louis County PACE program, as well as the Show Me PACE district, which now provides access, can provide access to the entire state, and does currently to every major metropolitan area and secondary metropolitan area in the state. So with that, are there any questions for the panelists? I might have missed this, but can you all talk about if there was one phrase that you can think about as far as how messaging is different for the healthcare and medical community on energy efficiency, what would that be? What makes it special and unique compared to a different sector?
Well, Travis, I'll take a stab at that. We're in the healthcare business, right? And I mean, one thing that I can think of, early in my career, I was in the boardroom of a health system in Cleveland, and we're looking out at the window, and the CFO comments to me that he's looking at a coal-fired central utility plant, and it's spewing emissions over, and he's like, Mike, we're in the healthcare business. I mean, we just can't be doing this. So I would say that, but the thing is that the healthcare system's got lots of demands for capital, and things like central utility plants and parking lots and stuff that not directly related to net patient revenue is not always that's the stuff that hits the cutting room floor often. And so I would say that PACE in a healthcare setting allows you to align a healthcare mission with a healthcare capital. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of that's how I would look at it. It's alignment of mission with capital.
Okay, Lois.
Yes, from our standpoint, the key phrase would be healthy communities. And that has become one of the pillars of our sustainability program. We talk about healthy communities. So we have an obligation to care for the earth, to minimize our environmental impacts, and to create those healthy communities, not only for our patients, for our associates, for our visitors, and focusing the second phrase would be triple bottom line. So we do create financial, environmental, and social benefit. We need to have that intersection of all three things. So we're definitely cost focused, absolutely. But we're also focused on environmental concerns and social concerns in the work that we do.
Great. Michelle?
Property owners, for the most, especially in healthcare, are not in the business of commercial real estate. They should put their capital towards their business, providing services, and use cheap capital elsewhere, to, especially if it's cash flow neutral on an annual basis, but their money should go towards their business and providing services.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any questions from the group? All right. Well, if anyone is interested in PACE, I encourage you to go to moenergy.org or showmepace.org, moesp.com, and set the pace stlouis.com. All three, all four can get you there. And PACE is a great option no matter what sector you're in. Michelle, Lois, Mike, thank you very much for your time. This is very informative and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
All right, so we are running a few minutes behind, but we're going to stick with our schedule. We'll have 15 minutes to stretch your legs, get your lunch, and come back. And then we will start with the pay as you save session. And before we do that, just a quick message from our sponsor, the Nature Conservancy.
The Nature Conservancy has developed a science-based approach to accelerate the deployment of low-impact wind called Site Wind Right. The strategy and corresponding low-impact wind map are designed to help wind developers and power purchasers identify locations